Chapter 1, Chains in the Market of Stars. The auction square burned with color. Neon glyphs scrolled across hollow screens, pulsing like heartbeats, while alien voices rose and fell in cacophony that never ceased. The Market of Stars sprawled beneath a translucent dome that revealed the black velvet of space beyond. Ships drifted in orbit like silver fish, their running lights glittering in the void. Inside, the air carried the mingled stench of roasted spice meats, overheated circuitry, and something sharper, fear. Kaelira stood shackled at the center platform, cold metal biting her wrists. Her scales, once burnished gold under her family's crest, now dulled to a muted bronze. She kept her chin high, though her stomach churned. The crowd of species that pressed close, six-eyed traders, insectoid mercenaries, bulbous-skinned nobles wrapped in gauze, saw her as nothing but a commodity. Her own family had placed her here, for their debts, for their honor, for themselves. Lot 12, barked the auctioneer, his translator implant rendering his rasp into a smooth, emotionless tone. Female, young, educated, bloodline of the House of Air. The murmurs rose, a ripple of interest. Kaelira squeezed her eyes shut. House of Air had once stood proud. To hear it auction like a brand was a wound deeper than any chain. Opening bid, 5,000 credits. Numbers called out in guttural syllables and musical chirps. Her heart pounded, each bid driving home the truth. She was no longer a daughter, no longer a free soul. And then she heard it, a voice unlike the others, low, rough, carrying an accent alien to these stars. 10,000. Silence rippled through the crowd. Heads turned. Kaelira forced her eyes open. At the edge of the auction square, leaning against a rust-streaked railing, stood a human. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his clothing simple, scuffed space of leathers, patched at the elbows. His hair was dark and untamed, his jaw rough with stubble, a scar traced from his temple to the edge of his cheek, faint but undeniable. He didn't belong here. Humans rarely came to the outer markets, and when they did, they kept their heads down. Yet this one stared directly at her. Her throat tightened. His eyes weren't calculating like the others. They weren't hungry or cruel. They were searching. The auctioneer's translator glitched, stuttered, then confirmed. Bid accepted. 10,000 credits. Any counter? No one spoke. Whispers hissed through the alien crowd. A human bought her? The gavel slammed down. Sold. The guards unclasped their chains with sharp jerks, the cold cuffs clattering to the ground. Kaelira's knees almost buckled, but she steadied herself, pride refusing to let her collapse before them. The human stepped forward, boots striking the metallic floor with deliberate weight. He produced a datapad, flicked a thumbprint across the glowing screen, and transferred the credits without flinching. When the guard shoved Kaelira toward him, she tensed, expecting a harsh grip. Instead, his hand closed gently around her arm. Not ownership, anchoring. You'll walk with me, he said quietly. His voice was gravel and warmth at once. Kaelira jerked her arm, but his hold didn't tighten. It released. He was giving her the choice, though she had none. Confused, she fell into step beside him, her bare feet padding against the cold alloy tiles. They passed beneath swaying lanterns filled with phosphorescent jelly, shadows rippling across his face. She risked a glance upward. His expression was unreadable, set jaw, but no malice. Finally, she whispered, her voice raw from silence. Why? Why by me? He didn't answer at first. The market noise swallowed the question, neon lights flashing across his eyes. Only when they reached the docking corridor, with a hum of ship engines thrummed to the metal beneath their feet, did he speak. Because no one else was going to. She stopped walking. The words struck harder than the chains had. No bargain. No cruelty. Just that. Her people had abandoned her. Her blood had sold her. And this stranger, this human, had spent 10,000 credits not to own her, but to save her from the ones who would. Kaelira stared at him, her pride fighting against a sudden, dangerous stir of hope. The corridor lights reflected off the docking bay beyond, where a battered freighter waited, its hull scarred but engines glowing faintly. The human gestured to it. Name's Yarrick. That ship's mine. You'll be safe there. Safe. The word felt foreign. Hollow. She swallowed hard, claws curling against her palms. She did not trust him. Could not. Yet as she stepped toward the ship, the hum of its engines resonated deep in her chest, like a heartbeat in the void. For the first time since her family's betrayal, Kaelira felt the faintest flicker that maybe, just maybe, her story was not yet over. Chapter 2. The Human Bid. The docking bay doors groaned shut behind them, sealing out the noise of the market. The sudden quiet pressed in, broken only by the hum of power conduits and the hiss of hydraulic seals. Kaelira's pulse thundered in her ears as she followed the human, Yarrick, down the corridor. The air was different here, cleaner, though tinged with oil and ozone. It smelled of machinery, not the spice-laden rot of the bazaar. The lighting was dim, flickering strips of pale blue that gave his scarred face a cold, merciless cast. He didn't look back at her, just strode with steady confidence toward the ship she glimpsed earlier, the Rustwing. Its hull was pitted, scorched, patched in places with mismatched plating. Compared to the sleek merchant vessels around it, the freighter looked half dead. Yet when Kaelira's eyes traced its lines, she saw something else. Survival. The ship bore wounds but still flew. Just like him. A guard's voice echoed in her memory, mocking her as she'd been dragged to the auction block. Worthless blood, not even fit to serve. And now, here she was, walking free beside the strangest of creatures. Get in, Yarrick said, lowering the loading ramp with a hiss of pneumatics. Kaelira froze at the base. If I refuse? She asked, her voice sharper than she intended. He turned then, finally meeting her eyes. The dim bay light caught the pale gray of his irises, steel in human form. His gaze was steady but not unkind. Then you walk back into that market, he said evenly. Chains again. Maybe worse. Up to you. The words cut like a blade of truth. No false promises, no soft coaxing. Just choice, bare and simple. Her claws flexed against her palms. Pride urged her to spit in his face, to defy him. But another part, the part that had endured her family's betrayal, the auction, the humiliation, knew survival sometimes meant walking forward when everything in you wanted to stand still. She stepped onto the ramp. Inside, the Rustwing was alive in its own way. The narrow corridor vibrated faintly with the heartbeat of its engines. Pipes rattled overhead, and the air was warmer, filled with the metallic tang of coolant and the faint sweetness of some earth plant he must have grown for oxygen recycling. Her people's vessels had always been pristine, polished, full of sterile efficiency. This ship felt lived in, scarred, yes, but real. Yarrick sealed the ramp and led her deeper. His stride was purposeful, but not rushed. He didn't watch her as if expecting her to bolt. He trusted she would follow. That unsettled her more than any chain could. She turned from him, stepping into the cabin. The door whispered shut, leaving her alone with the stars. For the first time in days, no eyes judged her. No hands forced her. She lowered herself onto bunk, but her body trembled with confusion. Her people had sold her without hesitation. Her so-called allies had bartered her bloodline away. And now, a creature from a race whispered of in taverns, reckless, fragile, untrustworthy, had done what none of her own kind would. The Rustwing's engines thrummed through the walls, steady, alive. Kaelira pressed her palm against a vibration, as if seeking an anchor. Somewhere beyond the thin door, Yarrick was preparing for launch. She didn't trust him. Not yet. But for the first time since the betrayal, she wondered if perhaps survival could mean more than endurance. Perhaps, just perhaps, this human meant to show her. Chapter 3. Life Aboard the Rustwing. Kaelira woke to the ship's heartbeat. A deep, steady thrum carried to the bunk into her bones. It wasn't the sterile, almost musical hum of her people's vessels. This was uneven, layered. Old pumps breathing, coolant lines whispering, a fan somewhere with a faint tick each revolution. The air tasted of metal and citrus disinfectant, with a green breath of something living. She slid from the bunk. The cabin door parted with a tired hiss. No lock, no guard outside. The corridor was narrow, patched with mismatched panels, edges softened by use. Someone had scratched little arrows near valves and switches, human letters scrawled by hand. Bleed here. Don't touch unless you know why. A drying rack overhead held a line of damp cloths, and tucked beside them, a clipped sprig of leaves, faintly sweet, the same note she'd smelled on entry. She followed it to a pocket of warmth, a cramped galley. A pot simmered on an induction plate. Steam fogging a viewport where the station's rings crawled past, bright with traffic. Yarrick stood at the counter, sleeves shoved up, tapping a spoon against the rim. He glanced over his shoulder as the door slid open. "Morning," he said. His eyes flicked to her bare feet, then to the corridor behind her, as if noting every detail and filing it away. He gestured to a metal bench. "Sit. It's edible." She hesitated on the threshold, waiting for the correction, the command, the first test. None came. Yarrick ladled stew into 2 bowls. Thick, pale, studded with cubes of something that gave off a clean, nutty smell. He set both on the table and took a sip from his own first. Only then did he nudge the second toward her. "What is it?" she asked. "Soy protein with root veg and salt from a real ocean." His mouth tilted. "Earth comfort food." She wrapped her fingers around the bowl's warmth, but didn't eat. Custom curled around her throat like a collar. In noble houses, the lowest tasted last. Old habits warred with new emptiness. Yarrick didn't push. He ate, quiet, eyes turned to the viewport. Ships flared, docked, drifted, their running lights threading through darkness like bioluminescent fish. The stew cooled under her hands. She lifted the spoon. The first mouthful was bland, then blooming, salt giving way to a mellow earth sweetness she hadn't known she'd missed. She took another, slower, tasting more than hunger. "Ship's yours to walk," Yarrick said after a while, not looking at her. "Don't go into the port engine to sell unless you feel like losing eyebrows, and keep clear of the armory. Everything else, if you're curious, ask. You trust me with your ship?" The question slipped out sharper than she meant. He glanced at the handwritten notes on the bulkhead, as if they'd answered for him. "I trust that you don't want to die in vacuum," he said. "And I don't like locking doors." Something in her chest loosened and immediately tightened again. "You could gain status for owning me, among some species." He shrugged, and in the gesture was an entire atlas of human indifference to certain currencies. "I'm not some species." He set a spoon down, metal soft against metal. "I don't keep passengers. I keep crew. You're free to leave at the next civilized port. Until then, if you want work, I won't stop you." The lighting flickered. The floor's gravity twitched, just enough to make the spoon lift and settle with a tiny clink. Kaelira's hand shot to the table edge. Yarrick was already moving, crossing the galley, thumbing a breaker on the wall. The ship's hum shifted an octave, steadied. "She does that on undock," he said. "Old dampers. You always listen for the second hum." She found herself listening. There was a shy vibration under the main engine's roar, coming into alignment like a note finding harmony. "Your coolant pulse is out of sync," she said, before she could stop herself. "By a fraction. You can correct it by staggering the loop, alternate cycles instead of simultaneous." Yarrick paused mid-step. His gaze sharpened. "You work systems? House academies aren't limited to dance and diplomacy." She lifted her chin. "I can read a pulse graph." A beat. Then he reached into a drawer, pulled out a slim tablet scarred with years of use, and slid it across the table. "Show me." She tapped through diagnostics. The interface was clumsy compared to what she'd known, but the ship responded with a living creature's patience. She adjusted the timing by 0.3 of a second and watched the graph settle, a tiny wobble smoothing into a clean wave. The fan's tick vanished. Jarrick's smile was small, real. "You just bought us an extra 50 hours before the next maintenance tantrum." He nodded toward the corridor. "Come see the bridge." The bridge was compact, almost cozy. A pilot's chair sat dead center, scarred armrests fitted with patched wiring. Beside it, a second seat, lower, with a viewport angled to catch the long curve of the station's outer ring. A plant grew in a cracked ceramic mug beside the console, leaves glossy under a grow lamp. Someone had tucked a strip of woven fabric around its base, blue and white, frayed at the edges. "Strap in," Yarrick said. She took the co-pilot's seat, fingers finding the webbing instinctively. He spoke to the ship without raising his voice, hands passing over controls, as if greeting an old friend. The docking clamps released with a bone-deep thunk. Kaelira felt the shift of mass, the reluctant slide into motion. The station's lights fell away. Space opened like a dark mouth rimmed with stars. "First time launching free?" he asked. "First time launching like this." Her hand brushed the console's pitted edge. "Your ships are ugly," he huffed. "We call it honest." Starlight struck his profile, turning the scar a pale thread. The Rustwing tilted, caught the starstream. The view stretched. Distant suns pulled into lines. Kaelira's breath thinned. The jump buffer charged, a faint vibration beneath her feet, a taste like copper at the back of her tongue. Yarrick reached past her, adjusting a dial. The cabin temperature dipped a degree, just enough to ease the burn beneath her scales. He didn't comment on it. He'd looked her species up. He'd noticed. The stars knifed into brightness. Space folded. For a heartbeat there was nothing but the ship's hum and the twin awareness of two lives bent toward the same vector. Kaelira's hands unclenched. Outside, the universe blurred into possibility. Inside, the Rustwing held steady, battered and stubborn. "Human? Crew, then," she said softly, almost to herself. Yarrick didn't turn. "If you want it." Chapter 4, Shadows of the Pursuers. The Rustwing tore free of the jump corridor, with a lurch that pressed Kaelira into her seat. Her vision swam until the stars sharpened again, cold, scattered diamonds against endless black. The hum of the ship steadied, alive, as if pleased to have survived another crossing. Yarrick flicked a series of switches, his hands moving in practiced rhythm. "Welcome to the belt of Thran," he muttered. "If trouble's following us, this is where we'll see it." The viewport revealed the belt, a stretch of asteroid fields lit by the fractured glow of a dying star. Shards of rock drifted in slow ballet, their edges gleaming with faint mineral veins. Beyond, a space station clung to the largest asteroid, neon lights burning against the void, docking beacons pulsing like lighthouses in the dark. Kaelira stared, her chest tight. The name of Thran tasted bitter. Syndicate territory. She hadn't told him everything. Not yet. How could she? That she wasn't just an unfortunate noble daughter traded away for debts, but a living vault of codes her bloodline carried. Defense schematics. Access protocols. The kind entire syndicates would kill to possess. And if the ones who sold her realized she was gone, they would hunt her. The console chirped, a sharp warning. Yarrick leaned forward, jaw tightening. 3 ships had slipped from jump not far behind, their silhouettes sharp and hungry. Pursuers? Kaelira's voice cracked despite her effort to sound steady. They didn't come for a friendly chat. His fingers danced over controls. A holographic display bloomed between them, showing the 3 vessels fanning out, sleek, well-armed interceptors, their drive signatures pulsing in predatory rhythm. Her claws dug into the armrest. The insignia that flickered on their hulls was unmistakable, the black and silver crest of the Syndicate. "They'll tear us apart," she whispered. "Not if I get a say." Jarrick's voice held steel. The Rustwing shuddered as he rerouted power. Lights dimmed, the engines howling in protest. He slammed a lever forward, and the freighter surged toward the asteroid belt. Alarms wailed as proximity sensors lit up with moving debris. Hundreds of rocks, each capable of splitting the ship in 2. Kaelira braced herself as the ship weaved through jagged stone. Her people's vessels would have avoided such hazards with careful charts and sterile precision. Yarrick plunged into chaos with something else entirely. Instinct. He trusted the ship's scars and his own reflexes more than any algorithm. "Are you mad?" she hissed, clutching the seat as an asteroid the size of a palace spun past, missing them by a breath. "Mad keeps us alive." Yarrick shot back, sweat beating at his temple. "Trust me, your hunters won't follow this deep. They don't know how to dance." Kaelira's pulse hammered, and yet, against reason, she felt it, his strange, reckless confidence steadying her own fear. The console sputtered again. "Warning. Shields at 40%, the AI croaked. One of the interceptors had loose plasma fire. The Rustwing rocked violently, sparks raining from the ceiling. Kaelira flinched, then pushed herself upright. Her training clawed to the surface. Defense strategies drilled into her by house instructors before her family discarded her. "Their vector will cut us off here." She pointed to a cluster of rocks converging. "If you pitch 30 degrees starboard and bank down, they'll overshoot." Yarrick spared her a glance, the barest flicker of trust. He pulled the yoke hard. The Rustwing dove, scraping past the spinning boulder, debris rattling against its hull. The interceptors, faster but less agile in the field, missed their shot, plasma bursts slamming into rock instead. Kaelira's chest heaved. "You listened?" "You were right," he said simply. "That's all that matters." The words struck her harder than the near misses. No demand for explanation, no suspicion at her knowledge, just acknowledgement, respect. Still, the danger wasn't over. A 4th signature blinked onto the scope. Larger, a command vessel, cutting off their exit route. Its hull gleamed with armored plating, its cannons hot and hungry. Yarrick cursed under his breath. "They want you bad." Kaelira's throat constricted. The truth pressed against her tongue, bitter as acid. "Because I'm not just a prize. Because my bloodline carries keys they'll kill for." She almost told him. Almost. But the words tangled in her shame. Instead, she whispered, "If they take me, they'll kill you." Not planning on letting that happen. Jarrick's grin was quick, reckless. "Hold on." He cut the engines. For a terrifying second, the Rustwing drifted powerless, swallowed by the asteroid field shadows. Kaelira's claws bit into the console as silence smothered them. Then, with a flick of switches, he rerouted power to thrusters only, guiding them like a predator gliding unseen through tall grass. The Syndicate command ship scanned the field, beams slicing through dust and rock. But the Rustwing slipped between shadows, heartbeat away from discovery. Kaelira watched him, sweat shining on his brow, hands steady on the controls. Human, fragile by reputation, reckless by design. And yet in this moment, He was proving something she had never seen among her own kind: adaptability, sheer, unyielding defiance. The interceptors drifted past, hunting in the wrong direction. The command vessel loomed, but Yarrick angled the Rustwing into the blind spot of a massive asteroid, its gravity tug pulling them deeper into shadow. Minutes passed like lifetimes. At last, the pursuers peeled away, jump drive spooling. The console pinged, confirming their departure. Only then did Yarrick lean back, exhaling hard. See? They blinked first. Kaelira's legs trembled as the adrenaline drained, but a strange, reluctant smile curved her lips. You're insane. Maybe. He glanced at her, the ghost of a grin lighting his scarred face. But we're still breathing, aren't we? She met his gaze, the words unspoken between them louder than the ship's engines. And as long as you keep fighting like that, maybe I will too. Chapter 5. Trust Forged in Fire. The jungle moon was alive with sound. Kaelira stumbled as her boots sank into loam that glowed faintly under the alien night. The air was thick, damp with vapor and sweet with the perfume of bioluminescent flowers. Above, twin moons hung swollen in the sky, their pale light filtering through a canopy of vast leaves veined with firefly threads. Every breath carried scents she couldn't name, resinous, metallic, almost like blood. Behind her, the Rustwing lay half-buried in a crater gouged by their crash landing. Smoke curled from its wounded hull, sparks dripping into puddles that hissed like acid. The hum that once steadied Kaelira in her bunk was silent now, broken. Yarrick limped from the wreckage, dragging a pack slung over his shoulder. His forehead was streaked with blood, his jacket torn. He didn't complain. He didn't pause. He only checked the weapon slung across his back, then scanned the jungle as if already calculating their odds. We'll need shelter, he said. His voice was steady, though his breath was rough. This moon's too alive for us to sleep out in the open. Kaelira's throat tightened. She'd read reports of such worlds, teeming with fauna whose instincts were older and sharper than any hunter's blade. She looked at him, limping yet unyielding, and for the first time since the auction block, the idea of survival felt possible. I know the signs, she said quietly. Her claws traced faint gouges along a nearby tree, fresh, the sap still glistening. The predators here hunt by sound. We'll need high ground away from the paths. Jarrett's brow arched, but he only nodded. Lead on. They moved together through a tangle of vines that pulsed faintly with internal light, casting shifting shadows. The jungle symphony grew louder the deeper they went. Distant roars, insectoid chirps that rattled bones, the heavy crack of branches under something unseen. Kaelira felt each sound like a pulse in her blood. Yarrick walked behind her, weapon ready, eyes darting constantly. His limp slowed him, but not once did he falter. At last they found it, a plateau of stone rising from the forest floor, reachable only by a narrow slope. Kaelira climbed first, her movement precise, each foothold chosen with instinct. Yarrick followed, breath rough but steady, until they stood side by side on the ledge. From here, the jungle stretched endless, glowing rivers winding like veins beneath the canopy. Kaelira turned, expecting him to collapse. Instead, Yarrick shrugged off his pack and set to work, pulling out a battered multi-tool, coils of cord, and a folded sheet of polycloth. His hands moved with sure, practical economy, weaving shelter from fragments that seemed useless until bent to his will. "You do this often?" she asked, unable to keep the disbelief from her voice. He smirked faintly. "Crash landings? More than I'd like." His gaze flicked at her claws, her posture. "You're not useless in the jungle, either." "That's unexpected." Her chest flared with heat. Shame, anger, pride tangled into one. "My house thought knowledge beneath me, but I learned. I survived their tutors. I can survive this." The wind shifted, carrying the growl of something vast below. Kaelira stiffened. Yarrick glanced at her, then reached for the fire starter in his kit. "Wait," she hissed, grabbing his wrist. "No fire. It draws them." His gaze met hers, steel under starlight. He didn't argue. He set the kit aside. For a moment, their hands remained locked together, the silence filled only by the distant cries of the jungle. When he released her, his fingers brushed her palm, not by design, but not without weight. Hours later, they crouched beside a ring of moss that glowed faintly blue, casting a soft halo around their improvised camp. Yarrick leaned against the rock wall, his eyes heavy but still alert. Kaelira watched the flicker of bioluminescent insects drift past, her own thoughts restless. "Why?" The word slipped before she could stop it. His head tilted. "Why what? Why do you keep fighting?" Her claws curled into her palms. "You're bleeding. Crashed. Hunted. My kind would call it hopeless. But you," she searched for the word, "you refuse to stop." He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the canopy where the moon's light fractured through the leaves. "Because the moment you stop fighting," he said softly, "you've already lost. I've seen what happens when you give up. It's worse than dying." His voice carried weight, something scarred deep, unspoken. She studied him, the lines carved into his face, the stubbornness that even blood and wreckage couldn't erase. Her chest ached. Humans, they are fragile things, but what burns inside them, it is something even predators fear. The wind shifted again. Below, something prowled, its growl shaking the stone under their feet. Kaelira felt her fear rise, but this time, when she looked at Yarrick, she didn't feel alone. She whispered, almost to herself, "Maybe hopeless isn't what I thought it was." Yarrick's lips quirked, just slightly, before exhaustion claimed him and his eyes closed. Kaelira kept watch, her claws resting lightly on the stone, the jungle's glow bathing her in shifting blue. For the first time since betrayal had stolen her freedom, she let the thought take root. Perhaps survival was not enough. Perhaps, with this human, there was more. Chapter 6, Confession Under Alien Skies. Kaelira knelt on the scar hull of the Rustwing, her claws scraping sparks as she tightened a jury-rigged seal. The twin moons bathed the crater in silver, their glow sliding over her scales like liquid light. All around, the jungle pulsed, luminescent vines twined upward, insects thrummed like static, and the distant howl of some unseen predator echoed off stone. Yet up here, on the ship's broken spine, it felt almost quiet. Below, Yarrick's voice carried through the night. "Careful with that sealant. The patch will hold if we coax it, not if we strangle it." She smirked faintly despite herself. "Your ship purrs when you talk to it, almost as if she believes you." "She does." He emerged from the access hatch, sleeves rolled high, forearms streaked with grease. He climbed onto the hull with a deliberate ease, boots thudding against metal, then settled cross-legged beside her. The moons painted his scar pale, the stubble on his jaw catching light like iron filings. Kaelira turned away, focusing on the seal. Her chest felt tight, but not from the work. "Why did you do it?" she asked finally. The words had burned in her throat since the market, but only now did they escape. "Why by me? Why not walk away?" For a long while, only the jungle answered. Clicks, chirps, the sigh of distant leaves. Yarrick leaned back on his palms, staring at the sky. Because no one else was going to, he said simply. The blunt honesty disarmed her more than any speech could. No promises, no noble cause, just the raw truth of a human who had seen her chains and decided he would not let them remain. Kaelira's claws tightened on the tool in her hand. Her voice wavered. "My own blood sold me. To them, I was a burden, a ledger line, worth less than the debts they carried." Her throat burned. How do you keep moving forward when everything that should hold you upright betrays you? Yerrick was quiet for a long time. She glanced at him and stilled. His gaze wasn't on her, but on the stars, his jaw rigid, shoulders taut as if holding back a weight. I know what it's like to be left behind, he said at last, voice rough. Battle went bad. My squad pulled out. They didn't wait. I crawled out alone, half dead, listening to comms chatter like I was already a ghost. He exhaled sharp. When no one comes back for you, you stop expecting anyone will. But you don't stop walking. Because if you stop, his hand curled into a fist against the hull. That's the real death. Kaelira's chest tightened until she couldn't breathe. His scars weren't just on his skin. They lived in his voice, in the way he refused to bow even when the galaxy pressed him flat. She looked away, blinking hard against the sting in her eyes. The moon shimmered on her scales, betraying the wetness gathering there. You fight because you refuse to stop, she murmured, even when everything says you should. Yeah. He tilted his head toward her. That's all survival really is. One more step, one more breath. Their gazes caught and held longer than before. The silence between them felt different now, charged, fragile, alive. Kaelira swallowed. Her claws flexed against the hull, leaving faint grooves. I don't understand you. Humans, you're fragile, short-lived, yet you burn like stars. No matter how many times you fall, you stand again. He huffed a quiet laugh. You make us sound braver than we are. Truth is, we're just too stubborn to stay down. Her lips curved despite the ache in her chest. Stubbornness, perhaps that is braver than anything. For a moment, the jungle's chorus dimmed. The glow of the moons painted the world silver. And Kaelira realized that for the first time since her chains, she wasn't just surviving. She was living. She shifted closer, her shoulder brushing his. He didn't move away. His warmth bled into her, steady and grounding, like the hum of the Rustwing when it still flew. Her voice was a whisper, almost lost in the night. If the universe saw me as worthless, then you are the proof it was wrong. Yerrick looked at her then, truly looked, his eyes lit with something fierce and unspoken. You were never mine to keep, he said softly, but I'll fight to stand beside you. The moons hung silent above them, witnessing a truth spoken not in vows or chains, but in defiance and choice. Two broken lives, woven together not by blood, but by stubborn survival and the promise of something more. Chapter 7, The Syndicate Strikes Back. The warning siren shrieked through the Rustwing like a living thing. Kaelira jerked awake in her bunk, claws scraping against the bulkhead. The deck plates vibrated violently beneath her, as if the ship itself was growling. Red strobes pulsed through the corridor, washing the walls in bloodlight. She was on her feet before thought caught up with her. Her heart hammered, the old reflex of prey hearing the predator's roar. From the bridge, Jarrick's voice bellowed through the comm. Strap in. Syndicate just dropped on our tail. Kaelira's stomach twisted. They found us. She sprinted down the corridor, the ship's hum fractured by the shriek of weapons fire rattling across the shields. The air tasted of ozone and burning copper. When she burst onto the bridge, Yerrick was already strapped into the pilot's chair, hands flying across controls, jaw set like iron. The viewport lit with fire. 3 Syndicate ships swarmed around them, their plasma cannons spitting arcs of searing green. Sparks rained from the ceiling as the Rustwing's shields absorbed another hit. They're boarding, Yerrick said grimly. I can't outfly all 3. We hold here or we don't hold at all. Kaelira's claws dug into the co-pilot's console. A familiar burn of shame rose. This was her fault. They don't want the ship. They want me. But she saw Yerrick, sweat beading his brow, refusing to yield. And something in her snapped. She wasn't going to be prey again. Then we fight, she said, voice sharp with new steel. Jarek's gaze flicked to her, and for a heartbeat, something fierce lit in his eyes. He tossed her a rifle from under the console. Heavy, human-made, ugly lines, but solid, honest. Keep it close. Boarding alarms will sound the moment they breach. The hull groaned like a beast in pain. Then the alarm screamed, a deep, pulsing howl. Grappling clamps had locked. The Syndicate was inside. Zero gravity engaged automatically, dampeners cutting out to minimize hull stress. Kaelira felt her stomach lurch as her body lifted from the deck. Her claws scraped against the wall as she steadied herself, the world tilting into weightless silence broken only by the hiss of atmosphere vents. The first blast door blew inward. Syndicate mercenaries spilled through, armored, faceless, rifles flashing. Kaelira fired. The recoil jolted her backwards, spinning, but her claws caught a rail, halting her drift. The plasma bolt hit true, sending a mercenary twisting, his armor smoking. Her chest burned with a mix of terror and exhilaration. Jarek launched himself from the pilot's seat, magnetic boots clamping to the deck with a heavy thunk. He fired in bursts, each shot precise controlled. He moved like the ship, scarred, battered, but unstoppable. A mercenary lunged for Kaelira, blade flashing. Instinct screamed. She twisted in zero-G, slamming her tail into his midsection. The impact sent him spinning into the bulkhead with a sickening crunch. Jarek caught her arm, pulling her steady before she drifted into the line of fire. Nice hit. Their eyes met for half a heartbeat in the storm, a thread of heat binding them even as chaos raged. The battle spilled through the narrow corridors, gunfire lighting the dark, sparks raining like stars. The Rustwing shuddered with every blast, its old bones straining but not breaking. Kaelira fought beside Jarek, back to back. Each time she faltered, he was there, his hand bracing her, his voice steadying the calms. Left flank, duck, good shot. Each time he staggered, she was there, her claws tearing a mercenary from him, her body shielding his. Fear roared through her veins, but something stronger rose with it. Defiance. She had been sold, chained, discarded, but not broken. Not anymore. At last, silence fell. The last mercenary floated lifeless in the corridor, drifting gently as the emergency lights flickered. Kaelira's chest heaved, scales slick with sweat, claws trembling as the rifle slipped from her grasp. Jarek leaned against the wall, breath ragged, his cheek bleeding from a graze. He gave her a tired grin. Not bad for someone who claimed she wasn't fit to serve. She almost laughed, a sound broken by relief. Not bad for a human who should have been dead 3 times over the night. They floated there, bruised, bloodied, but alive. 2 souls who should have fallen, yet refused. For the first time, Kaelira didn't just feel like Jarek's passenger. She felt like his equal. Chapter 8. Freedom written in the stars. The Rustwing drifted in silence. Stars spilled endlessly across the viewport, pinpricks of light in a sea of velvet black. The battlefield behind them was nothing but debris now. Syndicate interceptors cracked open like eggshells, their hulks tumbling, burning faintly as their reactors died. The void swallowed the last echoes of the fight, leaving only the steady hum of the Rustwing's patched engines. Kaelira sat in the co-pilot's chair, still trembling. Her claws rested on the console, stained with blood that wasn't hers. She stared at her hands, at the strength she had found tonight, the rage that had carried her through. She was not the same alien who had stood shackled in the market of stars. Across from her, Jarek leaned back in the pilot's chair, a ragged strip of cloth tied around his forearm, where plasma fire had scorched him. His eyes were closed, his chest heaving, but his grip never loosened from the control yoke. Even in exhaustion, he held the ship as though willing it to live. She studied him, her chest tightening, fragile, reckless, battered, and yet he endured. "You should rest," she said softly. His lips quirked, though his eyes remained closed. "Rest when we're safe." She turned toward the stars, her reflection ghosting faintly on the glass. "We may never be safe. The Syndicate won't stop. They'll come again. Then let them." His eyes opened, steel gray even in the dim light. "As long as I'm breathing, they don't get you." The words struck deeper than any blade. She swallowed hard, voice breaking. "Why? You owe me nothing. My people abandoned me. I am—" "Don't." His voice cut sharp, then softened. "Don't call yourself worthless. You fought beside me. You saved me. You got more fire in you than anyone I've met out here. And that's saying something." Her breath caught. No one, not even her own kin, had ever spoken to her like that. Not as property, not as burden, as equal. "I don't want chains again," she whispered, her claws curling against the console. "Not theirs, not anyone's." "You won't have them," Yarrick said, steady as the ship's heartbeat. He turned to face her fully. "You were never mine to keep, but I'll fight to stand beside you. If you'll let me." The silence stretched, heavy with choice. Kaelira's gaze drifted to the stars, endless, uncharted, waiting. For so long she had believed her path ended at betrayal, that she had been sold into oblivion, her story already written. Yet here, in the battered bones of a human ship, with a man too stubborn to die and too fierce to abandon her, she saw something new. Possibility. She reached across the narrow space between them, her claws trembling as they brushed his hand. His fingers closed around hers, not ownership, not chains, but a bond freely chosen. "I choose," she said softly, "not for survival, not because of blood, because I want to." A faint smile curved his lips. He tightened his hand around hers, a promise written in touch. Outside the viewport, the stars stretched wide as the Rustwing angled toward open space. Engines glowed, flaring bright against the void. The ship groaned, scarred but unbroken, carrying with it two souls who had defied everything meant to shatter them. Kaelira leaned back in her chair, her chest lighter than it had ever been. "Where do we go?" Jarrick's grin widened, fierce despite the blood at his temple. "Anywhere they said we couldn't." The Rustwing's engines roared, and with a flash of light, they leapt into hyperspace. Together, the Rustwing drifted into orbit above a neon-lit world, its fractured hull patched but still alive, engines humming like a weary heart refusing to quit. Through the viewport, Kaelira gazed down at the city below, spires of glass and chrome pulsing with alien glyphs, skylines glowing like rivers of fire. Voices 100 species filled the comm channels, layered in strange harmonies that reminded her just how vast the galaxy was. For the first time, she didn't feel small in it. She felt free. Yarrick stepped beside her, his reflection in the glass marked by the scar that had once seemed so foreign, but now felt like proof. Proof of survival, of stubbornness, of a human who never let go. The faint pulse of the ship's artificial gravity kept him anchored. Though she suspected it was him, she truly stood steady against. "They'll keep coming," Kaelira murmured. "The Syndicate, my family, all of them." Jarrick's hand found hers, warm and calloused. His grip wasn't possession. It was promise. "Then let them," he said quietly, eyes fixed on the stars. "The universe can keep throwing its chains. We'll keep breaking them." Kaelira turned, her golden eyes shimmering against the starlight. "You changed everything, Yarrick. You made me believe again." His smile was tired, fierce, unyielding. "That's the thing about humans. We don't quit on people worth saving." The camera of the universe seemed to pull back then, the battered Rustwing angling away from the city, soaring into uncharted stars. Two souls scarred but unbroken, carried forward not by destiny or blood, but by a choice Together,